Welcome once again to When the Facts Change, economics and politics in a fast-moving world, with me, Liam Halligan. I'm sorry I'm not in the When the Facts Change studio this week, but I'm travelling. As conflicts rages in the Middle East, attention's being focused not just on the UK's energy security, but also on the implications of Britain's particularly zealous net zero policies. We've lately heard the implications for the UK's car-making industry are particularly significant. So this week I'm talking to a well-known automotive industry insider. Back in the 1950s, the UK was the world's second largest car manufacturer and a major exporter. By the early 70s, Britain was producing almost 3 million cars a year. But since fallen steadily, with the UK making less than 1 million cars a year since COVID lockdown. In 2025, more than 700,000 cars were made in the UK, a 17% drop over the previous 2 years to a 73-year low. This drop coincided with the introduction of the zero-emission vehicle or ZEV mandate, DIF rules that require electric vehicles to now account for at least a third of sales, or manufacturers are heavily fined, rising to 80% of sales by 2030. But the demand for EVs simply isn't there in the UK. British-based car makers already shouldering sky-high energy bills can't compete with government-backed Chinese-made EVs. Heavily subsidised Chinese models now account for 76% of all EVs made worldwide, with China's share of the UK market now approaching 10% and rising fast. This week, Stellantis, which manufactures Vauxhall, Citroën and Fiat in the UK, said that production at its iconic Ellesmere pork factory in Cheshire was simply unsustainable unless the government urgently changed its ZEV mandate rules. To discuss this, I got in touch with Tim Tozer, the former boss of Vauxhall UK and a hugely experienced car industry executive. Tim makes some pretty chilling predictions about the future of the UK car industry and the so-called invasion of Chinese-made EVs unless the government changes its net zero rules. Welcome to When the Facts Change with me, Liam Halligan. Tim Tozer, great to have you here on When the Facts Change. You are the former boss of Vauxhall in the UK. You're an extremely experienced automotive executive who's worked all over the world for some of the biggest brands in the world. We've heard this week from Stellantis, which of course owns Vauxhall, that their UK manufacturing is unsustainable now. Why have they said that?
First off, Liam, thanks for inviting me. It's a great question, and we'll go across the piece in terms of the risks I see for the automotive sector in the UK, which are very high, and the implications of continuing on the path we are under a government that seemingly doesn't take much interest are going to be catastrophic. And, however strong it may sound, I think on this trajectory, within 5 years, we won't be making any cars specifically in the UK. And let me, talk about the Stellantis position. And they're not alone, Stellantis. Hyundai, the head of Hyundai Motor Europe, has made similar comments as to the difficulties of making the Hyundai business work in the UK market. He's an importer in this country, and they're globally competitive, Hyundai.
They are not exposed to massive UK energy prices, are they? And they still can't sell cars in the UK.
Exactly. So, but look, let's just think of what's the root of all of this. The root of this is the government wedded to net zero and the mandate, which insists that year by year on a ladder up to 2030, every brand selling cars in the UK market has to sell an increasing proportion of battery electric vehicles, up until the point whereby from 2030 on, no conventional powertrained vehicles can be sold. And this has essentially been government policy, the prior government as well, as this government, who've adopted it with a vengeance. And actually the start of the mandate coincided with the incoming Labour government. And the real issue is the market isn't ready for so many electric vehicles. They are not desired by consumers yet to the degree that it's easy to get to the mandated levels. And you can think of all sorts of reasons for that. Range anxiety was the first issue. The number of recharging points was another one. And, just generally people...
Lower resale values,
people not feeling that they're forced into buying the car they don't want. It's a cocktail of some of it emotional, some of it very rational. I mean, how on earth do you charge an electric vehicle cost effectively if you haven't got a drive to park your electric vehicle on? You can't do it. So there's a cocktail of stuff going on that is making it very hard work to easily sell electric vehicles in the market. Now, I mean, easily sell, it's getting easier now with cheap Chinese electric vehicles coming into the market. And it always was the case that, there was a glide path for the automotive industry as it readied itself for electric vehicles to put energy into how do we make cheaper cars. And Stellantis is a really good example of that. Globally, they committed and made all the right moves to invest in electric vehicles. Ultimately, I mean, they discovered that the only place they could get cost-effective supply of electric vehicles was China. And so quite a lot of the energy that's gone into in Western car makers has been working out how to deal with China. And we have to get to the reality of this straight away. The Chinese strategically, over the past probably 2 or 3 sort of plans that they put together, have determined through the procurement of all of the raw materials needed to make electric cars, colonizing bits of Africa to get the things needed. I mean, these are now in the hands of the Chinese, and they are the global experts on the manufacture of both batteries and cars now.
So let's just recap there, Tim. Let's just recap.
Yeah.
Bring people with us. Tory-initiated policies, implemented and toughened by Labour, started out, if you're a car manufacturer in the UK or selling cars in the UK, you had to sell 22% of the cars you sold had to be electric vehicles.
Yes.
Then that went up to, we're now near 28%, I think.
Yes.
It ratchets up each year, and it ratchets up all the way to 2030, by which time it will be a complete ban on new petrol and diesel cars in the UK. The EU, their ban is 2035, and actually their ban is slipping back in even further into the future. Basically, the ban's been almost junked, it seems to me, in the European Union.
The EU has been trying to soften.
That's
the news recently, which we can cover in a bit, as to the 500,000 job losses over the next period of years for Volkswagen. I mean, that is dramatic news, but it's all part of the same issue. I mean, the tectonic plates of the industry have been shifting from the very moment that I think Germany decided, in the aftermath of Dieselgate, they were so ashamed by that that they had to push the electric vehicle as the answer. Yeah. And now the prices are starting to be, the chicken's coming home to roost.
We have very heavily subsidized Chinese vehicles.
Yes.
And the Chinese also, their 5-year plans, as you said, you mentioned the last 2 or 3 of them, they've basically invested heavily in the production of rare earths. They control 90% of the production of rare earths globally now. and you need those rare earths for the batteries. So basically, you've been warning for a lot of years. Many other car industry executives have been warning, though it's difficult for them because they've wanted to do what the government wants in terms of battery vehicles, but they've been saying, look, the Chinese are going to take over our car market because they have much cheaper, heavily subsidized EVs that are increasingly of good qualities. The only way we can sell, the majority of our cars being EVs is if they're, ostensibly Chinese, and we're now seeing that happening.
Yes.
To what extent are we now at a crunch point? Stellantis is a very big company. They've made the statement that they have this week. VW, as you said, I think it's 50,000 jobs they've said they're going to junk in Germany, which is just astonishing. Car making in Germany is a religion. To close down homegrown VW factories in Germany is an enormous socio-economic move. It strikes me, Tim, you're the car industry executive with the years of experience, but it strikes me as someone looking on that the West European car making industry and the UK car making industry in particular, given our uniquely stringent net zero rules, is absolutely now at a crunch point.
Yes, it is a crunch point. And it does feel to me as if this government, wedded to net zero, and applying the mandate, the ZEV mandate, rigorously. I mean, they've allowed some flexibilities with hybrids being able to be put into the mix to a degree. I think that was a concession to please Toyota, who have two factories in the UK, and they are the experts at manufacturing hybrids.
So your 22%, your 28% this year can be not just battery electric vehicles, but hybrids too.
It can. But there are plenty of examples, and brands, various brands, wouldn't talk about this openly. But, one place to go if you're not meeting the mandated targets is to buy credits from the Chinese manufacturers who are well able to meet the mandated numbers of electric vehicles. And that sort of sticks in the gullet, doesn't it? I mean, if you were a Stellantis and not meeting the mandated targets, excuse me, and then you were thinking, well, hang on, one way out of this is to buy the credits from the Chinese. Well,
so just to explain that to non-specialists, what you're saying is that car companies, they have to make so many electric vehicles in order to be able to sell, petrol and diesel vehicles without breaking the 22% or 28% limit, because every single vehicle they go over that limit with their petrol and diesel sales, they're fined 15 grand for every single vehicle, which is completely prohibitive. So in order to be able to sell their petrol and diesel vehicles, you've got UK-based car makers, giving away their market share to Chinese competitors in order to avoid fines.
That is exactly what's happening.
That's insane.
It is insane. It's insane. And let's come back to the Stellantis position. I mean, Stellantis are saying that the activities in the UK are at risk. I mean, in actual fact, the only thing that Stellantis manufacture in the UK at the moment are electric vans in Ellesmere Port. And that's somewhat unfortunate for them to the extent that, vans are probably the last type of customer that would be rushing to have an electric vehicle. I imagine the post office might have a few because they want to wave the flag and point in the right direction. But the typical person that gets up early to get in their van to go to work, most likely not having the ability to charge a van overnight, a van is just not in the way of thinking for them because of range, because of the uncertainty, because of the price, et cetera, et cetera. So Stellantis are hung out there in terms of UK manufacturer with something that is at risk. And they're not the only ones that are at risk in terms of continuing to want to manufacture cars in the UK. I mean, let's just go through the roll call of the factories we have. Nissan up in Sunderland, a fantastic factory making historically up to 500,000 cars a year, with very high levels of productivity, very often sort of acknowledged as the best and most efficient factory in the EU.
In Europe,
in Europe.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the big macro picture, which is all coming from this sort of turn towards electric vehicles, I mean, Nissan globally is in great difficulty. It wasn't long ago that the Japanese government were wanting Honda to take over Nissan as a sort of marriage of the equals to strengthen the capabilities of the Japanese industry to fend off the Chinese. That fell apart. That leaves Nissan exposed, in my opinion, which means that, you could wonder what that factory is going to be up to. There are talks that they are considering the manufacture of some Chinese vehicles in that factory. Okay, that might keep a few jobs for a few years, but it's nothing like the strength that Nissan had represented in the UK manufacturing arena. You've got BMW down in Oxford making petrol-engined minis.
Cowley.
In Cowley. I mean, the deal that Kemi Badenoch did when she was the minister responsible with BMW was, I think, a £5 million pound level of support on the basis that the factory was modernised, on the basis that electric mini production would be repatriated into the UK from China. Well, I would say now, on the basis that there are no tariffs on all Chinese vehicles coming into the UK, why is there any economic motivation for BMW to repatriate electric vehicle production to Cowley? I mean, I don't see it. And indeed, BMW have said that they have put on pause the investment necessary in that plant. So there's a question mark over that plant. I mean,
in the Midlands as well, you've got JLR, right?
You've got JLR who have paid a price relative to the hacking of their data issue. I mean, that's a separate issue. But JLR, as a manufacturer, would have been quite rightly, in my view, banging the doors down of government to say, give us some scope with hybrids within this EV mandate structure, because they don't make any battery electric vehicles yet. They have new Range Rover coming, but that's been quite a long time coming as a pure electric vehicle. They are investing in a battery plant down in the west of the country. But they've got a long way to go before they could get to the mandated levels of EVs as a business. And indeed, what we must remember about JLR is they are a relatively small scale operation in the global car industry. I mean, we Brits love Land Rovers and Range Rovers. Of course we do. And I want that business to succeed and thrive and prosper. But they're a small beer company. They're 500,000 cars a year, which is pretty small. And yet they've got all these pressures upon them. Now, then I think you have to come to, what is government doing about this to try and help? They would claim that they have flexed the details of the mandate to allow a bit of flexibility. But despite that flex, you've got, as I've mentioned, Hyundai saying, we're struggling to see how we can make the market of the UK commercially desirable for us. You've got Stellantis saying exactly the same thing. And I've raised those questions as to BMW. I'm sure they would be asking that question quietly, very quietly. But, it's all up in the air. And
you said earlier, Tim, and it really struck me, for somebody of your, long-standing expertise and experience in the British car industry. But we know the British car industry, the top 10 car makers in the UK are all foreign owned, right? So
yes,
but we're still, before the pandemic, we were still turning out 1 million plus cars a year. And we were still employing, getting on for 1 million people in the industry as a whole in the UK. Many of those jobs in parts of the country where there aren't many well-paid jobs, with huge respect. But the car making industry was providing good, solid employment, lots of tax revenue, and so on. You're now saying, and I know you weigh your words carefully, you're now saying within 5 years there could be no significant car making in the UK outside of a few, it's very specialist, small scale marques, and so on. What's the socio-economic impact of that?
Well, it's enormous. I mean, the car industry, as you just touched upon, has never been a British car, not in recent decades, has not been a British car industry. It's been a car industry in Britain. And, many of the people interested in this will remember, it was Margaret Thatcher that encouraged the Nissan plant to open up in the aftermath of British Leyland collapsing. I mean, the only bits of British Leyland that have effectively stood the test of time is the Jaguar Land Rover business. I mean, the jobs that were lost from British Leyland were enormous. When I started work at Leyland Cars in 1977, I mean, the cars division alone employed 400,000 people in Oxford and Birmingham. Now, those jobs were all lost. And in the move to services, the economy has always surprised me as, my goodness, how did we lose all those British Leyland jobs with actually the economy through the 80s, 90s shrugging that off?
Yeah. Because we carried on manufacturing cars, right? Albeit under foreign brands, but that's been okay. But what happens if all those jobs disappears? These car plants, the local areas, you've employed tens of thousands of people over the years. Yes. You know what this means.
Well, I mean, the Vauxhall business that I ran, at the time I was there, which was now sort of 10 years ago, employed 6,000 people. And that was in the two plants, Luton and Ellesmere Port, and of course the sales and marketing activities in Luton. And so, these jobs are at risk. And actually, if you take another often unspoken of brand, Ford of Britain, had extensive R&D activities in Essex. And virtually all of those jobs have gone because they were all about getting ready for electric vehicle production. And the R&D involved in EVs is less than a conventional powertrain car. And I mean, Ford jobs in Dagenham and the R&D centres, I don't know how many are left now, but I mean, certainly if you go back 3 years, 4 years, there were rounds of redundancies of 400, 500, 600, just chipping away at it. Now, Ford still do make electric engines up in Ellesmere Port, Halewood. And so there's something there, but it's, a shadow of its former self. But certainly, manufacturing in the UK, which was relatively easy to encourage on the basis of we had the skill sets, we had the supply chain, we had the respect in terms of the knowledge of the car industry. I mean, we had Nissan doing all of its design work in Paddington in London. So all the sort of myriad of work involved in taking a design through to manufacturer was available to be presented to global car companies to say, look, you can invest in the UK. And investment in the UK, went well and strongly supported. I mean, estimates of 1 million cars, 1 million jobs, all in all, including car retail. And one of the strengths of the UK market for manufacturers was, hey, not only can we make cars in the UK, but we've also got a very strong market with more than, well north of 2 million up to 2.5 million new cars being sold a year. to sort of piece it all together. Very strong market, knowledge of manufacturing, all joined up.
Decent workforce.
Decent workforce.
A lot less
trade unions,
heavily unionised than it was.
Yes, but the trade unions, my time at Vauxhall and my time at British Leyland, I mean, the trade unions, were problematic, to say the least, in British Leyland days.
They destroyed it. They destroyed the industry.
They did. But, I mean, the relationship we had with Unite at Vauxhall was good.
Much more sensible.
They understood.
Yeah,
and they participated fully in cost-saving measures and productivity improvements with Vauxhall. So, look, no complaints about the trade unions, and indeed the trade unions are spot on now in being very concerned about the direction of travel and for the car industry in the UK.
Pushing for an easing up of this ZEV mandate, as a lot of the trade unions are. So,
yes.
Final couple of questions, Tim. The first question is, I'm looking at the car. I don't have the access that you do to industry intelligence, but just looking at the publicly available car sales figures for, the beginning of this year, 3 of the top 10 companies in terms of sales are Chinese. The sort of China invasion is coming. Sorry to use emotive language, but that's how it feels. What does, when British car making potentially stops, unless this ZEV mandate is changed in 5 years, what does the Chinese involvement in the British market look like? How dominant will it be, given the heavily subsidized EVs that they are now starting to export? And do you think the British government will be forced to become protectionist? Because we're unusual, aren't we, in the fact that we don't put tariffs on Chinese made electric vehicles. America's got 100% tariff on Chinese made electric vehicles. The EU don't make it easy for the Chinese either, but we make it completely easy for them.
We are an open door for the Chinese. I have said on the record in the past that when the Chancellor of the Exchequer went to China in the immediate aftermath of Labour taking office, they went on bended knee. And it must have been discussed with the Chinese authorities that we'll give you a free pass into the UK car market, because the government, clearly want to encourage electric vehicles, and the Chinese are very good at that, as we've discussed. Now, look, what will be left when and if the doors are left open for the Chinese to come in? I mean, they already have a 10% market share of the UK market. That has happened overnight almost in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And growth is going to continue to be significant, exponentially driving forward. British consumers are pretty savvy. They've worked out that actually there's nothing wrong with these Chinese cars. They're quite good. Yeah. They're good value for money.
Yeah.
And why not?
Yeah.
So look, there's an open door. That is extraordinary. We are the only major market that has provided that open door. I mean, the history of quotas and tariffs, extended to Japanese vehicle imports into the UK being controlled up to 1999. So we should be able to replicate something like that to ease all of this. I should say one thing importantly. The industry is not wanting to turn its back on electric vehicles. So it knows the direction of travel. The problem is all the pace of imposition through the mandate, which is distorting the market. So customers don't know what they can buy. So they're being forced into electric vehicles. The government is subsidizing electric vehicles to try and encourage take-up. There's a questionable use of public money in that regard, I would say. I know certain manufacturers who've allowed the £3,500 to go into the car cost calculation, and they've simply taken away their marketing support, tactical money support to the same tune.
Yeah.
So, this is
bung to the company.
All sorts of dysfunctional, unintended consequence of a policy which really should be torn up and thrown away. And we should be allowed as an industry to breathe again, to let the animal spirits come back, to let customers understand that the direction is there, but it has to be a ladder that is sensible and slow, that can work in sync with the availability of sort of recharging capabilities and confidence in consumer mindsets as to now I'm ready to consider an electric vehicle.
And of course,
we're a long way from
our ZEV mandate is much stricter, isn't it? It's worth putting that in context. It's much stricter than the EU's own version.
Absolutely. I mean, we are absolutely.
We're totally an outlier in the world, given the punitive nature of the fines on car makers, unless they, almost instantly go to across the board, no petrol and diesel cars.
If I was a CEO of a car company today, I'll be sitting in my office thinking, well, how much money do I have to give to discount an electric vehicle to make it acceptable in the market? But that might only take me a little bit of way to meeting the mandated numbers. So then I'm still staring down the barrel of the fines. And then, my goodness, do I have to go to a Chinese make to buy those credits because they've found it easier to perform? I mean, this is all really going in a downward spiral. And I've already run through the various manufacturers that I think are at risk in the UK. The market could recover if the mandate was torn up and started again. It is as dramatic as that.
Final question, Tim, in a nutshell, what is your message to the Labour government? What is your message in particular to the figure in the Labour government who really is the most zealous imposer of these rules, Ed Miliband? What do you say to him?
I would say that if you see that the car industry enforcing this mandate upon them is part of your net zero agenda, to the extent that it's going to cause massive job losses and possibly the wipeout of car manufacturing in the UK, you have to rethink. You have to reverse gear, because this is going to kill the industry. The animal spirits are gone. The consumer confidence isn't there. The Chinese arrivals are going to be the kiss of death over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. And as well, you should therefore put tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, Chinese vehicles in total, to give the industry a breathing space.
Tim Tozer, former boss of Vauxhall UK. Thanks a lot for appearing on When the Facts Change.
Thanks for joining When the Facts Change, economics and politics in a fast-moving world with me, Liam Halligan. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and my podcast via Spotify or the podcast app. And above all, please subscribe to my When the Facts Change Substack.